So we had a great panel on New Way, California, with the kind of Republican side. Part of our theory here is that when you've got a dysfunctional system, you got to go to the next level. So we wanted to talk a bit with all of you about how does the Democratic Party or the left more generally actually become a more healthy, vibrant, positive force than it is already. Let's assume that there's positive good, but we want to go to the next level. And so, Cassie, since you were focused on the messaging, why don't you kick us off a little bit around, in terms of, some of what you were sharing is really important from a neuroscience perspective about like how we speak to people and how we language, but build on that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally believe that 99% of people in the Democratic Party and the liberal and progressive side are doing absolutely everything they can with their whole hearts to make positive change in the world. So it's not intentional. They just don't know the scientific evidence about what changes people's minds and what kind of persuasive techniques work and what shuts people down, what makes them want to move away from you. So I think one is just to bring that information to the front lines, to the people who can use it, and that requires some convincing of them to understand the conventional methods aren't working, because right now there's a little bit of an epidemic in the liberal progressive side of things to be victim oriented, and it's not working because we were hacked, it's not working because of Comey's revelations, it's not working because of all these unfair things that happen to us. And it's like, well, okay, those are barriers, but it's actually not working because you are not embodying the principles that you claim to stand for, and you're not using what we know, the science of behavior change, the science of what makes people take an action or what helps them make a decision has not come to you yet. So I think that there's some real great opportunity to boost the good work that's already happening.
Awesome. Spencer, so you're doing grassroots work, Flip the 49th. What are you learning about how to even evolve the left's mobilizing and motivation tactics? Since you're having a lot of success, I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing about Flip the 49th is that it's a grassroots organization. It grew out of the closest congressional race in 2016 in the entire country, was down in San Diego and Orange counties. And all this activism that started up and sprung up in response to the 2016 election, it focused in on this district. People looked around and said, where can I make a change? Where can my impact have the greatest effect? And that was right here in a congressional district that was decided by just 1,600 votes. So what the left and what this movement has shown us since 2016 is that the infrastructure to support the activism in the district was lacking and needed to be built up from the bottom up in the community. And so more than just buzzwords and the fact that campaigns have moved away from on-the-ground action, what really needs to be there is the support from the community and bringing members of the community along in the process of your organizing, and being driven by the desires and the needs of the community itself.
Great. Well, Richard, so you're sort of in many ways like straddling both worlds. You've had time.
Absolutely. I've warned you in advance that I'm briefly going to be hijacking the session. Could everyone hear me in the back? Good morning, Sacramento. Apologies to Robin Williams, but here I am. We are I'm going to be a bit negative, but it's going to end positively. For the last 2 years, I've been working on a system of movement, not a party, but a movement that will get all the great people on the left, the great people on the right, and mainly the centrists together. 100 million people voted in the last election. 100 million people didn't vote. We had a turnout of about 51%. There are another 150 million people that have never registered, because they didn't think their government had any space for them. We're going to change that. The centrists are going to take power. We are at a critical point in our world where there's no sidelines. You can no longer be on the sidelines. In the 60s, when I grew up, it was either you're part of the solution or you're part of the problem. That's simple. Now, what's happening, this war on our liberal democracies, not just in America, but across the entire world, is putting in danger the idea of a liberal democracy. One party has hijacked our language, liberal, liberate. It's to free. A liberal democracy is freedom of self-expression within a democracy. Liberal is not left. I'm dyslexic. I like L, easy to see. I like I like O. Everything else is confusing. L's, both of these are L's. I don't know. The only thing in common between the left and liberal is they both start with L's. We have to get away from that. We're all going to leave here with a tremendous amount of energy, but how could we do something this afternoon? How could we do something tonight or right after this talk? You could sign up to be part of the Common Sense movement. In this movement, you're not giving up anything. If you're a registered Democrat, you could still go that way until we have a majority of people. We're never going to run a candidate until we are the people. We're looking for 40 million people. Originally, I thought very naively that I could do this in 28 days. I would talk to 2 people, and they would talk to 2 people. And if that chain is unbroken, within 28 days, you've reached just under 250 million people. I did this in May. I have 44 members, 42 of which I know very well. Even my wife, who I love and adore, she signed up, but she couldn't get 2 people. She said, honey, but where's the there? I said, have faith. It's like Dumbo used to fly with the feather. Have faith. If you build it, they'll come. I've just simply opened a portal. And through this portal, everyone that says, as Peter Finch said in Network, I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. We don't have to do this. How many people here want to get the money out of politics? Just raise your hand. The only places I talked around the country where I get a unanimous raising of hands is getting the money out of politics. By having the majority, you can take all the money out of politics because you don't have to run against anybody. You're going to win all the time. You don't have to do it. And at the end, the first year that we run a presidential candidate in all 50 states, we get to collect $100 million for the government. None of this money's ever been collected because to run for president, you need $500 million or more. And so they can't take the $100 million from the government because then they can't get their PAC money. We're not going to have to do anything. So every 4 years, our organization will be funded by the government. I have a set. Now, here, I'm going to say a word. Briefly, in conclusion, now you've just heard a sigh because Stephen knows he's about to get his panel back. See, now this is as easy as we could take over the country the way that I've just hijacked our seminar. Is it the green button? Oh, the big one. Okay, this is easy. With my wife's help, I finally did a PowerPoint. You could go on, and you have to be careful. Now, when you're going out into this domain stuff, all these names are taken. And I wasn't going to pay a lot. $7.50 seemed the right amount for me. So to get onto it, you actually have to type in carefully, it is just commonsense.com. You only have to do that once. It's a lot of work, but you could bookmark it. And you'll get to here. And if you see in the upper left-hand corner the 3 little bars, that's going to take you to here. They're my 44 supporters. We have the home. We've got daily updates, which I do occasionally. Oh, by the way, Thursday's canceled last week. A lack of interest. I'm almost done. I'm concluding. Then you could go, and let's say we'll go to the national platform. One of our plaques, to be committed to sound fiscal strategies that stimulates growth while maintaining sustainable borrowing. Participate. Everyone gets to go in and put their ideas. Initially, we're going to have an AI that sorts out the crazy stuff, but we're going to continually work. These are all things that everyone wants. On a state level, we have to get rid of gerrymandering. We should be circles. You can't divide towns into 2 different districts. Gerrymandering controls who's ever in power. We started. This is what's going to get people going. Right now, I've changed from 28 days to 28 weeks. Now we're on to 25 months. Now, with 25 months, that means we could reach over 200 million people before the next presidential election. You change the world, which has such big problems, by simply changing yourself, and hopefully you are the inspiration that will change someone else. This is a movement. People are going to come back, and they're going to say, gee, you look different today. What's up? Well, they're not going to say, well, I joined the Republican Party. Okay, I'm gone. Boom, boom, boom. sign up today. You could actually start making a difference. And while people are laughing, I've got some of my best friends who don't return my phone calls now.
Right.
But at the end of 22 months, I think we could take control of the country.
Okay, well, I'm going to do something a little bit provocative after that, and also just reflect on what we just witnessed, too. I appreciate you and your passion, and I think it's important also to reflect on the dynamics, too, because part of what I think in the political process happens is there is a kind of like an urge that my message or viewpoint should be dominant over others, and so in some ways you just embodied that. And I don't want to make you wrong for it, but it's in a way it's like as a self-reflective exercise of like how do we do politics in a different way, where it is about a deep honoring and respect for the other. Because just as a poll, like how many people did that totally land for? How many people felt like that was like a big yes, and how many people felt like were uncomfortable around that?
Oh, my goodness. I apologize.
Yeah. No, and so, no, again, we're not trying to make you wrong, but I think it's important as a self-reflective exercise of seeing, like, the way in which we typically engage politics is it's an exercise in assertion over the others, and then it often kind of creates a little bit of retraction. And I think that it would just be good not to just kind of make it a teachable moment, if you will, because I think what you're doing is actually really important with the Common Sense Party. And how we do it is part of what Cassie was talking about in her presentation. How do we do it in a way that really invites people in and that it creates a dialogue that builds? And so I'd love for you to get some reflection from you.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that I go back to what I said earlier about the expert versus the tour guide.
Right.
And we have learned to be evangelical in our progressivism, and the passion is beautiful. And the problem with it is that as we do that, we're often a power over. You know, we're really trying to be like, let me deliver to you all of the ways in which you are wrong, the things that you're not seeing,
right.
the things that I know and that you need to know. And so a really good exercise that we put people through in our program is one of finding your own vulnerability around what does it mean to you to get your point across to someone else? Because if you understand what I'm saying or believe what I'm saying, then that makes me blank. If I can't get across what I'm saying, that makes me blank. If I'm able to convince you, then my life is blank. And what you learn is people say, if I'm able to convince you my life is meaningful, if I'm able to convince you, it means I was right. And so when you can really explore that inside of yourself and understand that some of your change-making work is about the actual issue in the world and some of it is to make yourself feel right and better and purposeful and meaningful, and to kind of work on letting that as an orientation go and letting the service to the world and the service to the universe come through you as more of a tour guide. Like, I discovered this when I looked into this problem, and then I found out this, and then I wondered this, but then I was wrong. It was actually this, and what I discovered is this, and I want to share that with you guys. And it's a very different feeling in the room than the evangelical aspect.
Mm-hmm. And it's really, the evangelical, it's something that's both, it's become our dominant mode. In a way, we are modeling off of like the dominant mode, left and right, is a more evangelical mode right now of a proselytizing of a key viewpoint that like I have the solution, and that is what it ultimately leads to a lot of the breakdowns that we have.
And just to reinforce the importance of what you were saying about the center, is that if you're working to activate your base, the evangelical approach is awesome. Like if you want to reinvigorate your base, the 25% of people who voted for the Democratic side, then that's great. If you want to reinvigorate the right-hand side, that's what they're doing over there. But if you want to get to these 50% of people who don't vote, who feel apathetic, who don't see a place for them in either place, they are totally turned off by both forms of evangelicism. They want to be heard. They want to be brought into the process. They want somebody to ask them what they want and what they want to do. And so I'd love to hear more about what you're doing, because it's like...
Yeah, also from a millennial perspective, too, is that like part of what, at least my perception is, that millennials are looking for a different kind of engagement, too, in the political process.
Oh, absolutely. So millennials, I would not describe us as apathetic or uninterested in social issues. We're actually very passionate about social change. The disconnect that we've been trying to work at in my own role at Flip the 49th, trying to connect us to younger people, the disconnect is that they don't feel a place for them in necessarily either political party or the political process. And the question has to be, if we have 200 million people not voting, we have to think outside of this traditional top-down, we're going to deliver a message to you, and all of a sudden this policy idea or this proposal is going to turn something in your head, and all of a sudden, okay, I'll decide to start voting. The reason people don't vote is varied and much in between, and I am learning so much about that through this process. So Flip the 49th, we're laser focused on people in the electorate who are not likely to vote in a midterm election. And so we've been going around, knocking on their doors, calling them. We find really interesting reasons why everyone feels not engaged in the process. And in order to find those solutions, it would not be something that I could dictate down and say, well, this is why young people aren't voting, because I'm a political science student at UC Davis right now, actually. I'm very engaged in the political process, so my perspective is extremely skewed in that sense. So this model of bottom-up organizing is where you'll find the ideas and the solutions to what's actually happening on the ground, as opposed to dictating down, if I just give you the right idea or the right pitch, you will, all of a sudden, something will change and you'll decide to engage in the process.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Richard, I hope I'd love to just have a little
I'm thrilled by this, which is why I came here, because
Yeah.
I've just gotten a free consultation from Cassie, which I very much, I've saved thousands of dollars. And Spencer is, it's his generation that is going to lead this country. What I've tried to provide here is simply the portal where everyone could be involved on an equal basis. You're one-to-one with a computer. You're going on, you're putting your ideas in. I don't know the answers, but I know the center needs a place. You need a place where you could leave here today and you could start making a real, actual change. Mm-hmm. And the center is, with Spencer and I were talking back to the side, the center is actually much more left-leaning than right-leaning, mm-hmm. which is fine. But we have to get away from these divisive terms and terminologies. Both the Republican and the Democratic Party, I hate to use the five-letter N-word, which is never, but I don't think they're ever going to get together because each one's identity is somehow built on the vilification of the other side. Mm-hmm. And that means for them to accept the other side, they've invalidated their position. That's why I think we need to form a beginning with new people. And I came here for help, not to give a lesson.
I think that's such an important point, because in the process of the vilification of the other, you create an identity, you're wedded to that identity, and you vilify the other to reinforce that, then that turns off so many of the people who are in the middle that you're trying to reach, because they just don't want to be part of it.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that I spoke with the campaign manager of a very progressive and awake candidate, maybe one of the most progressive and awake candidates. And I gave him like the 5 or 6 minute pitch on campaign science about how, disgusting people and infuriating them is going to push them away. And he said, I just have to be honest with you. Our number one goal right now is to infuriate and disgust our voters about what's happening, to mobilize them. And I said, well, it's probably going to work for your base, but it is not going to work for the 50% of people who aren't voting and don't know what to do. And he just stopped for a minute and said, send me more info.
Well, it's an interesting challenge, because if you do have to kind of do this dual function, if you're going to run for office, you have this dual function. You got to mobilize the base, and the red meat kind of energy tends to mobilize that. But then you're in the midst of alienating. But if you're trying to speak to both audiences, I know from a marketing perspective, if you're trying to speak to two audiences, you're usually speaking to nobody at the same time. So I wonder how you've seen that in Flip the 49th. How do you speak in a way that meets people where they're at rather than just plays into these dichotomies?
Yeah, no, I think it's less of a question of how do you speak and more of a question of how you pose questions, because you
Right.
need to be asking and talking to people about meeting them where they are. So Flip the 49th, we grew out of all the activism that happened in the district right after the 2016 election, and it organically became a collaboration between all the new activist groups and the party and labor, and that was not easy. That was not an easy process. There were a lot of long meetings. We spent 3 hours talking about a calendar once. But it's less of a question of trying to find the exact pitch and the exact words to try and mobilize people of different ideological perspectives, but for my organization, trying to mobilize folks that already agree with us, but there are barriers to voting, there are barriers to getting involved, and making them feel a part of the process and giving them a piece of the process and then moving them up a ladder of engagement. So if you showed up once, then let's give you something else that you could possibly do, and just keep bringing you into the process. So all of our literature is designed by our team. You know, nothing in the traditional candidate-centered campaigns says we should go and talk to the people that have only voted once in the last 5 elections. Any campaign manager is going to say, we're not going to give you money to go do that. That is why we've been talking as campaigns to more narrow bases, more narrow audiences over the last 30 years, the invention of micro-targeting. And so there has been this pullback from trying to talk to everyone. So I'm super interested in the question of how we try and talk to everyone. For our organization, we're just trying to talk to the folks that we know are with us, because this is a really unique historical moment and a crucial election in 45 days. Please go knock on some doors.
Great. Richard, I love, I want you to come away feeling good about this exchange too, because I actually do appreciate being able to have this reflective process. And so I guess having had this exchange now, how might you think about approaching in a more inquisitive, because there is a hunger and you're recognizing a big base, and I think you've got a good threads of a good platform. So how would you go about engaging and listening to this group so that you can mobilize it better?
Well, I'm here to learn, and I've already learned so much, because I want to talk later with Cassie to see what I'm trying to do is simply provide the portal where everyone has input on all the ideas. So I'd like to work with you on the language as to how we could bring people together. And I'd like to work with Spencer's expertise as a young person, I'm trying to take the cult of personality out of politics. This is not about me. This is about setting up a portal so that people have a place where they could actually do something right away to say, I'm looking for change. And I'm very curious to talk with Spencer later as to how you think this portal, which has already been built, how it could open its doors, because it's totally inclusive. It's to give people a chance. So I came here for expertise, not to teach, but to learn.
Well, one thing, I just wanted to say one thing I love about what you're doing is that centrist perspective. I ran into a candidate in the Bay Area who's running for local office, and he's not running on a platform. He's meeting with all of his constituents for about 3 months, up until about, I think it's October 20th, he's going to reveal his platform, which is based on what his constituents told him, because he's thinking of representing them. Wow.
That's representative government.
Wow.
Yeah, and I just want to we're in the last minute here. I just want to honor the pivot that I just felt you make, because you were you had something that was bottled up and you wanted to get it out, and then you really pivoted in this beautiful way. And I think that is a great modeling of how we all kind of evolve the way we're engaging politics, so that there's space for the different synergy of viewpoints, and that we really collectively move beyond some of the evangelical impulse that just tends to shut things down rather than open it up. So thank you for your modeling of how to do that and Flip the 49th. Thank you for the campaign science behind that. And thank you, Richard, for demonstrating here live in the panel.
Great, you're a real inspiration. I really have to talk with you later. I think we're all on the same page.
Yeah, thank you.